You are now watching Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Every month, Cultural Survival brings you the latest news impacting indigenous peoples across the globe. This April edition features important stories from Europe, North, Central, South America, Africa, Asia, and beyond. Starting news from North America in USA. California plans to return 7.5 million acres of land and water to indigenous stewardship. This landmark policy honors century-old promises, allowing tribes to co-manage ancestral lands and use traditional practices like controlled burns to help prevent future wildfires across the state.
Moving to Canada, the New Chatlet First Nation has won a landmark legal victory to reclaim their ancestral lands on Nukta Island. A British Columbia appeals court overturned a previous ruling, finally recognizing the community's ownership and allowing them to protect their forests for future generations.
In Australia, Indigenous divers in Western Australia are restoring the world's largest seagrass meadow after a devastating heatwave. The team is using sea cucumbers to naturally fertilize the seaweed, protecting local wildfire and helping fight climate change by supporting the massive plant's recovery.
Moving to Africa now, in Nigeria, the original inhabitants of Abuja are urging the Nigerian government to provide long-awaited compensation and land titles 50 years after their eviction. Displaced residents report poor living conditions, while activists demand the right to elect their own governor in the capital.
Now news from South Africa. Indigenous leaders are calling for an immediate halt to mining on South Africa's west coast. They warned that a rush for minerals threatens ancient lands and the livelihoods of fishermen. The groups are demanding environmental studies to protect their heritage from industrial destruction.
Moving to Asia now, in Nepal, a major investigation has been launched into a controversial cable car project on Nepal's sacred Mukumlung mountain. The compliance advisor ombudsman, an independent watchdog, is probing claims that the International Finance Corporation funded project ignores indigenous people's rights, damaged local biodiversity, and proceeded without the free, prior and informed consent of the communities despite ongoing protests from community leaders.
In India, Hyatt Hotels faces a US government complaint over a luxury project near India's Kaziranga National Park. Activists say the resort displaces indigenous families and blocks vital wildlife corridors. Critics are calling for an immediate halt to construction and formal mediation.
Staying in Asia, in Bangladesh, indigenous groups are demanding that the government scrap a new forest park project. Leaders say the plan threatens their ancestral lands and way of life. They have given officials 1 week to stop construction or face nationwide protests.
Now moving to Latin and South Americas, in Paraguay. Indigenous protesters have blocked a major highway in Paraguay to demand government protection for their ancestral lands. The group says illegal logging and fires are destroying their forests, threatening the survival of relatives living in isolation and their legal rights.
Moving to South America now, hundreds of Chachi families have fled their homes in northern Ecuador following threats from armed groups and the disappearance of a local leader. These displaced families now face a humanitarian crisis and are urgently calling on the government for food, protection, and aid.
in Argentina. Thousands marched in Argentina to mark 50 years since the military coup. Indigenous leaders joined human rights groups to honor victims while also demanding an end to modern land evictions and racism. They called for government protection of their ancestral territories.
And in Peru, indigenous leaders from Cusco are in Lima demanding urgent repairs after a recent gas pipeline explosion. They warn that frequent leaks pollute their land and threaten local tribes, while families face high energy costs despite living atop the nation's gas supply.
In Costa Rica, police are investigating an arson attack on the farm of indigenous leader Pablo Civar. Local residents and firefighters managed to stop the blaze before it destroyed vital forests. Civar remains under international protection following repeated threats over his land activism. That is all for this edition of Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Stay tuned for our next broadcast. For more information on the rights of indigenous peoples, visit cs.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky.